So yesterday I was walking around the yard and I got stung by a bee, and now I'm feeling pretty sick. So I figured this is a perfect opportunity to record my first devlog on a game I'm developing called The project started exactly a month ago, on July 16, the morning after Game Maker's Toolkit announced the theme of this year's Game Jam. I had no plans of participating in any Game Jam, but I was scrolling Twitter and saw people posting about the jam, and I figured it would be a nice benchmark to see what I can make in less than 48 hours. The theme of the jam was Roll of the Dice. Seeing as making art is my favorite part of game development, the first thing I did was make the main character. I was pretty happy with the results, and now that I had the dice, the next thing on my to-do list was implement rolling. This took a few hours, but I used the built-in Unreal Engine physics asset system with which I had previous experience, and I used the rest of the day tweaking the physics and adding the logic to calculate which face is facing up. This concluded the first day of development. Night came and I still had no idea what to do with the physics-based rolling system. I knew I wanted to add combat to the game, but I wasn't sure what effect the rolling should have on combat. A common technique for coming up with ideas is to float the idea around in your head and relax as much as possible. For example, right before falling asleep. There are stories of great artists holding a metal object in their hand over a metal pot, and when they fall asleep, they let go of the metal object and the sound of impact wakes the person up so he can quickly write down what came to his mind in the relaxed state. I didn't use any metal objects or pots, but I had a vision just before falling asleep of how to merge the rolling mechanic with combat. Basically, when the player attacks an enemy, they do a base damage of 1 per hit, but each hit builds up a potential damage bar, which then is multiplied by the number you roll, with a max multiplier of 6. So instead of hitting an enemy 30 times to defeat him, you could just hit him 5 times and roll a 6, so the resulting damage is 30. I was really happy with this idea, and the first thing in the morning I got to implementing this mechanic. I feel like it added a tactical aspect to combat, of deciding when you want to roll to multiply the damage you have already done. At this point, the game was pretty much done, and I used the remaining time to polish some stuff up and add some visually interesting props to the scene. The game ended up placing 1773rd out of 6144. I couldn't care less about the result because I could see the potential of this game, and the end goal for me now was to take this game and release a full version of it on Steam. For the gameplay, I wanted to add the best parts from 3 of my favorite games: the cozy and relaxing farming from Stardew Valley, the cognitively challenging automation from Factorio, and lastly, the combat and map design from the Souls series games. I designed the 3 main gameplay loops to reinforce each other. The player starts with farming plastic, then the player has to refine the plastic grains into plastic pellets and other materials so he can craft weapons, armor, and other gear. Once the player is geared up, he is ready to fight enemies and bosses that scatter the world. So farming more plastic increases your crafting capacity, which in turn boosts your fighting ability. And lastly, while fighting, you loot new crafting recipes and seeds for new crops, so it loops back to boosting your farming and crafting capacity. So any action the player takes makes the player stronger. In the last 4 weeks of development, I have almost completed the hub world map, in which the player can build his own house and farm. I've also added some NPCs to the map, like Piggy the vendor, Ruby the tutorial cube, and some plastic army guys to guard the city walls. I also created the main villain of the game, the evil mouse guy, but I'll tell you more about him a bit later. I want the game to feel cozy and wholesome, so the visual design is extremely colorful and soft. There are some weak enemies and the first boss in the hub world map, but I wanted it to feel like a tutorial area, so it's not a stressful area to be in. From the hub world, the player will be able to travel to other maps with tougher challenges. So far, I've only started blocking out the kitchen level, and made some progress on the sandbox level. The world quickly started growing and Dice Guy was a bit slow on his feet, so I've added an appendage board to help him get around faster. This devlog is getting pretty long now, but I still have tons of things I want to share about the game. I'm still unsure if I'll make these videos weekly or monthly, but make sure to subscribe so you don't miss them. And please, if you have the time, wishlist Dice Guy on Steam, as that helps me out enormously. I hope you've enjoyed the first of many devlogs, and I'll see you soon.